Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's, we could say, class on coordination and subordination, which should be fairly obvious. Well, obviously from the title of this week's lesson, but also from what you see here on the top of our little page. And what this is going to be, we might think of this as being sort of a scratch sheet. Like du brouillon, as they say. And I'm going to sort of illustrate things by sort of typing in examples and using arrows and kind of working with them, and hopefully that's sort of the new way we're doing things as far as these recordings are concerned. Hopefully it should be pretty clear by the end of this class what we're talking about, how you use, how we can use coordination and subordination, and then sort of separately. So we're just going to have a reminder of sort of what subordination is, and we haven't really discussed this much, and which is perhaps something of a flaw, because we've been using subordinate clauses. When we talk about nominal clauses, we're talking about subordinate clauses, and when we talk about adverbials, these are also subordinate clauses. So we're gonna just remind you of what exactly we mean when we talk about subordinate clauses, and we're just going to try to be really precise when we talk about sort of like what a main clause is. We're going to learn a little bit about what a matrix clause is, and then we'll go on to considerations about coordination, and then to sort of look at what happens when the two are mixed, and hopefully this will, the whole goal of this is to be able for you to sort of map out big sentences with lots of clauses in them, and the idea is that you can actually navigate probably better than you might have thought. It's surprising how once you understand how the pieces fit together, how much more manageable texts become, because otherwise you might just sort of you get lost in the or what we might say is you wouldn't be able to see the forest for the trees, les arbres nous cachent la forêt. So it's just it's a question of sort of seeing the relationships between things and how everything kind of fits together in a sentence. And at the end of when we look at the relationship between or the combination between coordinated and subordinate clauses, we're going to see that we can actually combine them in a lot of ways to make very large complex sentences. So here we are. We're going to start with just a reminder of sort of what we mean when we talk about a subordinated clause, and we might as well look at what things that we've seen. We've looked at. Let's look at a sentence with a few subordinated clauses. I can say he bought the ticket. I could say he. No, that's not a very good one. I should do something. I could say he wanted what she did, and then I could say something like, although no one knew. Okay, so here we have a sentence. So in this sentence, we can see that we sort of have different parts. We see this what, and we say, I see we have a WH word. We might ask ourselves why we have we might ask ourselves, does this mean we have it here? I'm circling here, what she did. Does this mean we have, a WH interrogative? Does this mean we have a nominal relative? Then we have the although, so we have a subordinate clause. So the idea is we have two subordinate clauses. And the idea is what's going on with these subordinate clauses. So first, if we can identify the first, this is what we're used to doing, right? We're used to identifying these things, and we can use a little handy pen. Usually, we get to use this pen. There we go. Sorry. I might also use like a red color. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good point. Okay. So here we have this, right? Okay. And we have this. Okay. So first let's look at and we're going to label this 1. And this is sort of a convenient way to label it, and we're going to label this 2. So that way we don't get mixed up with these brackets, right? So that's kind of, obviously this pen isn't the most ideal thing we've got going. Hopefully that's clear enough that, we have 1 and 2. And now I think we're going to put this away we're going to put our little pen away for the time being. And I think this is probably going to be a problem. We'll see. Great. So now we can sort of ask ourselves, what is 1? So we get S is going to be structure, right? Of course. We might as well just remind. And F is going to be function. So we look at this thing and we say, oh, I see. Here we have wanted. We have wanted I could say he wanted fruit. He is not the same thing as fruit. We have 2 references. So it's going to be, this is going to be the transitive pattern where the subject, he is the subject, and what she did is the direct object. So that's going to be our function. We're just reviewing stuff we've seen before, of course, right? And then we look at, we have this WH word followed by a sentence of information. And so we might ask ourselves, there's kind of 2 possibilities. It could be a WH interrogative, but wanted is not an interrogative word. So that means the WH word, which always refers to something, when you say when, how, it always refers to something missing. So that very often will correspond with the question, but this just means that there is something non-specified, right? And as we've seen, that this usually corresponds with what we call a nominal relative, right? And that means we should be able to rewrite this WH word as a relative clause with a hidden antecedent, which means we would rewrite this as he wanted the thing that she did, okay? So that works. So that means we are going to have a nominal relative. Now this is not the real focus of what we've seen, right? This is a review of what we've seen before, but that's, we've sort of identified that. So that's our structure and function. And another thing we can do about, so notice we see that the function of this is a direct object in this sentence, right? So that means that it is subordinated to this sentence. So I'm gonna once again, maybe I'll try another color. Oops, I didn't activate the drawing, excuse me. And I'm actually going to put this here. We're going to see why later. So the idea is that 1. Hopefully now that we can see, I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna call this 3. All right, that's pretty good. I think I might. Okay, so we'll stop there with our little drawing, and now we're gonna. So, oops, I don't want to have this kind of. I want to get rid of this sum. Okay, I want to get rid of that. Okay, so we're going to call this 3. It doesn't really matter. It isn't extremely important what number. I want to make sure that I want to make this not be bold. Make sure that everything is clear. Okay, so we've seen that 1 is our nominal relative clause, and it is the direct object of this sentence, right? Okay, so here we have sort of the whole sentence number is 3, right? And we've said that it contains 2 things. 1 is inside of it, and 2 is inside of it, right? Okay. So the fact that these are inside might sort of lead us to believe that this is going to be subordinated to everything we have. So this is 1 is going to be our subordinate clause, because it's contained within 3. It's and we can say 3, what we call 3, the whole thing. It's what we call the main clause, right? So when we have subordination, right? When we have subordinate clauses, they're contained within the main clause. The main clause is very often it's going to correspond with the sentence, right? Okay, but we can have sort of 2 or 3 main clauses. So within main clauses, we can have subordinate clauses contained within them, right? So we've identified our main clause, and then we've noticed that we have our second one. I'm sorry about this boldface or caractère gras. Okay, so now we have our second one, right? Now we've seen this before. Here we have, although we can have structure and function. might as well. It's not necessary to get too upset about this because we've seen this, but notice here we see that we have, although we've noticed this is the subordinator. It's sort of like while, because, these kind of words. No one knew, right? Just this by itself would be a sentence. So we have our conjonction de subordination, right? Although it's a subordinating word, and because of that. That means we said that we have a sort of a general term for this. En français, on dirait ça, c'est une proposition en. Although, here we're just going to be very general, right? We're just going to say this is a subordinate clause. I admit it's a very wide definition, right? It's not very narrow, but it's I think the most practical way to just designate. I mean, it's a very loose term, but we're not going to look very much in this. But we notice we have a subordinator followed by something that could be a sentence, right? And that you've seen that that's the way it works. So we know that this is the structure, just a subordinate clause, right? Introduced by a subordinator, right? Okay. And the function, we've seen this before, is we've noticed this is sort of giving us information about this this event, him wanting, right? It's sort of giving information about it, and it's not a complement of that, right? It's when we have these sentences introduced by a subordinator, it means that it's not going to be a direct object like the nominal relative is, right? It's not going to have a nominal function like that. And so we looked at this and we said, oh, this is what we would call un complément circonstanciel. Ça serait qui exprime l'opposition, okay? Because although it's a word that expresses opposition, right? So here we have a subordinate clause that is adverbial, and it also is contained. Notice we have the whole sort of main clause, which here corresponds with the sentence. Very often, main clauses will correspond with sentences, right? Okay, so here we have our whole sentence, and we have two subordinate clauses in it, right? Okay, one thing that's a good. Yeah, that's a good thing to be aware of. Also, notice about adverbials. When adverbials, we have a subordinate clause adverbials, we can usually change the order. We saw that order is important, and when they're subordinate, and that will not change the meaning. So I can say, although no one knew, he wanted what she did. We just reversed these two parts of the sentence, and that worked well. Now, there's just one thing to say, just as far as terminology. So just aware of the fact that it might seem bizarre that the main clause includes all the subordinate clauses that are contained within it, because there is another term that we might want to use in certain if you sort of if you might have hesitations about naming something. I'm going to choose another color. We might want to just designate what you might think of as the main clause. And ça, c'est pas génial comme c'est nommé. Je vais désigner comme ça. J'espère que ça c'est clair. Here we're just indicating, and we're going to call this 4. Et la couleur n'est pas top, hein? So we're going to leave our drawing mode. We're just going to call this 4. What is 4? And so notice when the main clause includes the subordinate clauses, but when we're talking about the main clause that doesn't include the subordinate, just this part here, right? Et en français, on va parler ça comme la proposition principale. Mais en anglais, c'est juste un peu, lorsqu'on dit main clause, on parle de ce à quoi on pense lorsqu'on dit proposition principale. On parle de la proposition principale avec les subordonnés. That is what we call the main clause in English. Donc ici, lorsqu'il s'agit juste de tout ce qui ne comprend pas les subordonnés, we're going to call that the matrix clause. Et vous pouvez penser à ça comme, en quelque sorte, c'est comme un jeu de soustraction. Une manière de penser à la matrix clause, ce serait de penser à la main clause, et vous pouvez ôter les deux subordonnés, et il vous reste quoi? Vous restez le matrix clause. Et ça, c'est juste une question de terminologie. Pour si vous voulez juste désigner cette partie de la phrase, si vous voulez. Non, il y aura le verbe qui assigne les rôles grammaticaux à souvent des nominalisation ou des subordonnées nominales, à savoir des nominal clauses, d'accord, ici, et qui ne comprennent pas, et qui peut avoir aussi des propositions adverbiales ou des circonstancielles qui sont également portées sur le verbe. Donc ça veut dire qu'ils sont contenus dans la grande proposition, mais parfois on veut faire référence à cette partie de la phrase, si vous voulez, en opposant en ne pas y associant les subordonnés. So we're going to say matrix clause, but don't. That's just so you don't get too hung up on what to call things. We're not going to really use the term matrix clause, because the advantage of main clauses is that it strange is that it sort of allows us to sort of explicitly point out that when we talk about subordination, this subordinate clause number 1 and this subordinate clause number 2 are contained within what we call the main clause. They're contained within this thing. So that's sort of the basic principles. That's sort of, I would say, the terminology that we associate with subordinate clauses. So now we're going to move on to coordinated clauses. Okay, so it's sort of the general principles. First of all, I could say the first general principle would be anything. So we're moving on to coordination. Can be coordinated. So it's good to see this first. We're going to look at coordination of clauses, right? Of course, we're really focused on clauses in this class, right? That's sort of like the object of study. But before we look at that, the way that clauses are coordinated, it's a good idea to keep in mind sort of how coordination works sort of more generally. And it's actually sort of an extremely powerful tool. You can make any kinds of sentences. And we're just going to make sure that we're at least familiar with how it works, okay? When I say anything can be coordinated, that means I can say something. I can say, for example, bread and butter, right? I'm just going to give you some examples. Now, I want you to ask yourselves what's coordinated and what kind of things they are, okay? I could say I could say the chair or I could say the green, red, and blue chair. He was on and over the table. It's a little bit strange, hard to imagine, but that works. Okay, and so on. So first of all, anything can be good. Now notice, so here's some just examples, right? We're gonna just look at a lot of different examples. So notice, first of all, we have our, and we can underline it. That's underlining. Here we have and is what we're going to call our coordinator, or the long name for it is going to be a coordinating conjunction. So notice here when we look at although, we saw that was a subordinator, right? So we have sort of this, we have this sort of different types of grammatical words, right? We have notice the subordinator means that it makes anything that follows, even if it's a sentence, it makes it subordinated to. That means it makes it fit inside something else, right? And here it makes it fit inside that clause, right? As we've seen, this is clause number 3. It's the whole main clause. This whole thing is contained within it, although no one knew. That's what a subordinator does, right? It makes it everything. It sort of creates a unit, which is a clause, right? And it also makes that unit sort of contained within another unit, which here would be the main clause, right? So the coordinator, it's sort of different. So we could say that this is sort of it's very hierarchical. It creates, sometimes we can call this the subordinate. We can call this the inferior clause, right? Being the subordinate clause is sort of inferior, and the main clause, the one that contains it, is going to be the superior clause. So we notice that means we have sort of a hierarchical relationship. Number 3, superior. Number 2, inferior, meaning 2 is subordinated to clause 3, the main clause. And that means, we almost have this very kind of, very hierarchical language that we had sort of associated with like authoritarian state or something, or like the military. But that's there's this question of hierarchy is sort of one way to understand it. Now here it's completely different. Here we have bread and butter. When we have a coordinator, there's this more of a question of, it's sort of more democratic. These two things are sort of equal, right? Okay. We say anything can be coordinated, and I could say coordinated, I could say words are equal. Now when we say that they're equal, right, that means that they have same structure and function. Typically, this will actually really help you analyze. Sometimes writers play with this, but typically they're the same. So here we have better and better. Here we have, I'm not going to go. Here we have 2 coordinated noun phrases, right? They're in minimal noun phrases. They only have one word. Bread is a noun phrase, right? Bread is a noun phrase. Butter is a noun phrase. So hopefully you can see that it's very typical that we coordinate things of the same grammatical nature. Very often, by the way, we coordinate things in sort of like the same family of meaning. Bread and butter are both food, it's likely. But that's something to really be aware of if you want to. Hopefully what we're studying can really help you to analyze texts. But for example, there's a novel by his name is Somerset Maugham, and it's called The Moon and Sixpence. And 2 pence. So here, moon is a noun, right? And 2 pence is also a noun, but these things are sort of in different universes, right? The moon is not really in the same semantic group as 2 pence, and that creates a really interesting effect. And that's something to really be aware of. The sort of these coordinated, usually when we use them typically, right, we're going to join 2 things that are in the same grammatical family. Here we have 2 noun phrases, right? And also usually that sort of they're sort of in the same semantic group, meaning they have a meaning that not only they're in the same syntactic family, the grammatical group, they're both noun phrases, but usually, their meaning is kind of, in this, I would say they're in this similar, there's going to be some kind of something in common in their meaning. Here they're both kinds of foods. And by the way, of course, we can even say that here we have, phonetically we have the B sound, we have the consonants on the initial syllable. So in the initial position. So we have this idea of coordination. We're going to be talking about equality. So it's also interesting is that when we look at this again, notice we said they have the same. So here we look at the same structure, right? Here we have 2 noun phrases. Once again we have 2 noun phrases. Here the meaning's different, so that creates a specific effect. And actually, there's this is for not for this class, but there's actually a specific, really clever. There's actually 2. If you're interested in this, look up. There's 2 very closely related rhetorical devices. One is the Hendiadys, and the other is the Zeugma. One is more grammatical. One is more sort of poetic. And look these up if you're interested in this. And it's interesting. This means you're joining 2 things that aren't usually the same kind of word, and it's really really common. It creates interesting effects. You might even see this in commercials and things like that. But it's good to be aware of it. That grammar kind of grammatically we can do a lot of things, but sometimes if we sort of link 2 things that can technically be grammatically joined, right, and if the meaning is sort of dissimilar, it could create an interesting effect. So it would be nice for you able to be aware of that. So So we've insisted on this idea of sort of, here we have a hierarchical relationship between an inferior thing and a superior thing, inferior being contained within the superior thing. Here we have two things being equal, and one is not, the bread is not contained within the butter. If I'm going to, I might as well go through, be explicit as we can about this. Here we have bread, and here we have butter, right? These are two noun phrases, and they are coordinated, right? I could sort of make a C here, if you like, right? Okay. But here we don't have, 1 and 2 are not coordinated. No, we don't. Here we have 1 contained within 3 and 2 contained within 3. So here we have the subordination, and here we have coordination. These two things are kind of equal, right? Okay. One is not contained within the other. So that's what we really, and that this equality goes along with the fact that there can be exceptions, right? And that's interesting for being aware of, and that's if we have something like a Hendy, Hedis, or a Zugma, but typically they have the same structure, right? And typically they're going to have the same function, right? So here we don't have much to say about function because we're looking at these words in isolation, but let's look at our next example, is this chair was red and green. So here we're going to be a little bit more formal about it. Now I'm going to show you sort of a shortcut. We're going to call this one 1, and we're going to call this one 2. It's a little bit ridiculous because we only have one word, but it's good to be sort of consistent with the way this will be easier when we go to talking about noun phrases. So here we are. And so we can say 1. First of all, we're going to say 1 and 2 are coordinated. Okay? Good. So here we have 1 and 2 are coordinated. And then later, so that means we have the same, since they're coordinated, right? This is the sort of shortcut I was talking about. That means we're going to have the same structure and function. So we look at them and say, oh yeah, here, by the way, we have adjective phrases, right? We could say the chair was very green. Notice we're going to use an adverb before it as a pre-modifier. Oh, this behaves as an adjective. If you remember adjective phrases, well, I'm not going to get too much. We discuss this later, but the structure of this thing for both of these, this chair was very green, it was very red. We'd say, oh, I see. We have 2 adjective phrases. Commonly we would say it's an adjective, but if we want to be more formal about it, we could say they're adjective phrases. And here, notice, and the idea is they have the same function, right? And so to make your life easier, right? If you have 2 coordinated things, what you do is you say 1 and 2 are coordinated, right? Okay, fine. And then you just find, if you find the since they're coordinated, they have the same structure and function, you just say that they're coordinated and you sort of analyze the first one, right? And if you find its structure and function, you can verify it. The function will be the same as this other one, because the coordination has this idea of this equality applies to the function too. So here, look at the function. Say the chair was green. Oh, we have to be. That is what we call a copulative verb, right? The chair, we're talking about an attribute, right? So here we have the chair equals green. This means that we have the subject complement, right? We've seen this before. And you're done. You've said these 2 are coordinated. That means that means when you talk about, I should have said adjective phrase, excuse me. Here we're saying that means they're both adjective phrases, structure, and they both have the same function. So we can, that means, and the thing we can, another thing to say is that we can have, in theory, we could have, we can coordinate any number of words or groups of words, right? I could have written the chair was green, red, blue, and yellow, right? We could coordinate 5, and we would just say 1, 2, 3. We would, label them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are coordinated, and then we just say adjective, phrase, subject, complement. We wouldn't have to repeat this 5 times. So it can make your life a little bit easier, and makes you kind of understand is that these things, the fact that they're coordinated, allows you to associate them, and the fact that assign the same structure and function to both of them. Okay. moving on a little farther, just another point here in our next example. Here we have, I'm going to be a little bit quicker because this is taking quite some time. Here we have our next example, the green, red, and blue chair. As I've said, we can link more than one thing together. Here we have green, here we have red, here we have blue. Okay, so there's nothing here. We can just say, this is 1, 2, 3, and here you're just gonna say 1, 2, and 3 are coordinated, right? As it were, they both have the same structure. Once again, they're adjectives or adjective phrases if you prefer. And here, by the way, here we have a noun phrase, the green chair. Here the function is going to be pre-modifier, right? So we have 3 pre-modifiers that are coordinated, right? In this noun phrase, the green, red, blue, the green, red, and blue chair. Okay, fine. So that's another thing. So here we have adjective phrases. This next one is just to show you that anything. So first of all, we can coordinate a lot of things, right? Okay. This next one, just want to also show you that anything can be coordinated. We've just looked at noun phrases and adjective phrases, but nothing here we have, by the way, we've seen this, okay? This is going to be 1, this is going to be 2, okay? Here I'll just give a short explanation. I'm going back to, want to make sure that's, okay. So here for this next one, right? We have 1 and 2, right? They are coordinated, right? Okay, and what are they? Here, notice they're actually prepositions. Okay. Here I could say, oh, that's going to be a problem. Okay, I can't really do that. We'll leave it. So 1 and 2 are coordinated prepositions. So we can coordinate anything, right? Okay, that's a really important part to see. And lastly, what we're going to see here is, for this, I want to look at this question of asyndetic for syndetic coordination. Because I'll say syndetic. Start with syndetic. Syndetic, we have, let's say, with a coordinator. By the way, coordinators, examples of coordinators are going to be where it's like and, or, okay? It could be but. It could also be sort of, those are the main ones, and it could also be sort of for, okay? Now, but is not so obvious because semantically, usually, because the but expresses opposition, just like although. I can say he wanted what she did, but no one knew. Hopefully you can see that here, right? You say, wait a second, why is although no one knew a subordinator and but isn't? Now remember I said about the order. Here we have although is introducing a subordinate clause, right? And I said if it's subordinate, we can move it around. So I can say although no one knew he wanted what she did. That works, right? But if we say but, I can't say but no one knew he wanted what she did. So that means it isn't, but doesn't fully subordinate. Even though it expresses the idea of opposition, it doesn't fully subordinate this to this clause 2 within the main clause 3, right? It doesn't do that. So that means we would be dealing with a coordinator, right? So that's a sort of a point about but. D'ailleurs, au passage, ça m'énerve parce que on vous fait apprendre des choses en cours de français. Quand vous êtes au lycée, on vous dit oui, car et conjonction de coordination, et parce que et conjonction de subordination. Alors que c'est la même raison. On peut dire par exemple, je vous ai téléphoné parce que j'avais envie. Je peux dire je vous ai téléphoné car j'avais envie, ça marche, mais je peux changer l'ordre avec parce que j'avais envie, je vous ai téléphoné, ça marche parce que était une véritable conjonction de subordination, mais ça ne marche pas avec car parce que voilà, enfin, je pense que c'est criminel que quand vous demande de mémoriser quelque chose sans vous expliquer pourquoi, mais vous ne pouvez pas dire car j'ai envie, ça ne marche pas parce que car ne subordonne pas ce qui suit. Donc ça c'est la condition de la vraie subordination fait qu'on peut déplacer la proposition adverbiale qui suit. So here the idea is there's a certain number of coordinators. So the typical ones are going to be, and, or, but, or for. Now this means for, that means puisque, not na. I would say, because there's another for that's a preposition, and it's, which means car, pardon. It could be puisque aussi, but okay. So if for means I said so for, it was a wonderful idea, parce que. So for can mean there is a for that's rare, that's car. Okay, so it can. So these are our coordinators, and we've seen them used. You've seen them used here. Notice if I have two elements, I'm going to put the coordinator between the two. If I have a series of elements, I'm going to put the coordinator between the last two. Okay, and which means that actually 1 and 2 and 3, they're all coordinated, right? Okay, but that means we don't need obviously be very stylistically strange, but we in theory could have 2 ands here, but we don't need to, right? And that actually leads us to see something that sometimes we can have coordination without a coordinator, right? Okay, and that's what we call asyndetic coordination. There is I would say no coordinator, right? Meaning A, okay. Only juxtaposition. That means the two things are next to each other, right? Here, these things are next to each other, and so that will be, and I'll give you an example. The small, clean place. Okay, so here we have our noun phrase, the small, clean place, right? We might as well be explicit and analyze this. So we're going to activate our pen here. So here we have small and clean. So here, small and clean are just basically, we're going to call this one 1, and we're going to call this one 2. Okay, I hope that's fairly clear. Now we're going to say 1 and 2 are coordinated, right? And in parentheses you could say asymptotic coordination, because I could have said the small and clean place, but we can have coordination without a coordinator, right? And it's the meaning is exactly the same. Okay, so that's sort of what we could say. We're kind of dotting the I's. We're kind of making sure that all these little details that can kind of trap us up, we're good with that. And so this will be an end of this first video. The second video, we're going to be more looking at coordination and subordination with clauses. So thanks very much.